Thanks again for joining in today. We're looking forward to what we have to present for you. With that, go ahead and introduce our speaker of the day, Vivek. Vivek Joshi is the CEO and founder of Entytle, with his decades of experience working on both sides of the industrial equation. He is passionate about all things install base and simplifying install base workflows to give customer-facing OEM teams an opportunity to do more with less. He's also the founder of the Industry Next community, designed to help industrial leaders share and learn from each other. So with that, Vivek, over to you.
JW, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I appreciate it. I'm seeing a lot of people coming in from different time zones, which is good, east to west, as we say. Good coverage today. So as JW said, I've spent about 30 years in industry in business-to-business manufacturing, as we call it. And over that time, I've got to experience the highs and lows and some of the things that we see and take for granted today. So what I want to do with this session is kind of lay out our point of view in terms of where we think the market's going, the kinds of things that we see are important, that our customers are telling us in terms of the big issues they're dealing with, and then really our proposal or perspective on how we think is one way to handle it, right? So that's kind of the lay of the land today. And so the title of this webinar today is called Autonomous Aftermarket. And of course, if you take a look at those two words, autonomous is clearly something that's been in the lexicon recently with autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles, and so on and so forth. Aftermarket is something we're all passionate about, and in terms of the business-to-business manufacturing world, post-sales activities, revenue, and so on and so forth. So why do we marry these things together? What does it really mean? Why should you care about it? And really more importantly, how do you go about it is really the way we think about. So I want to kind of outline a few things that we're seeing here in terms of our customers. And so, the more we spend time in the market, and we've been at this journey for about a decade at Entytle, it is becoming very, very clear that the picture you see today is literally and figuratively what's going on within the manufacturing base worldwide, and certainly in Europe and US as well. There's a huge number of employees like Joe, this fictional character you see out here, who have been tenured for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And many of these folks are retiring right now. These long-term, long-tenured employees have been the backbone of these companies. They're really keepers of knowledge. The word tribal knowledge comes to mind every time I see a picture like a Joe. They understand everything. I was talking to a customer recently. I was talking to a prospect actually recently, not too long ago, and we were explaining to them some of the things we do. And he narrated a story to me where in a meeting, he was talking about a customer who, one of his colleagues who had been there for the last 30 years, and he remembered something from 2005 that he had put in a document that he put in a folder in a common shared drive. And that person, that colleague, was actually literally going to retire next month. So this is not a fictional picture. This is not something that is imaginary. This is real and happening everywhere across the manufacturing landscape, and it's a big deal right now. So what happens when people start retiring, the knowledge goes out with them. And so the question I have for my audience today is actually pretty straightforward. Do you have an idea of what you think is the, the average age of the workforce in US manufacturing? And some of you in Europe, maybe put your European numbers in as well. What is the average age of US manufacturing worker? I'll let this poll run for a few seconds before we stop the poll and see the answers here, right? I'll be able to share the answers in a second. And, this is relevant because it's actually interesting that we have this situation where it is one thing that you have the workforce that is aging. The secondary problem is that you have this situation where the generations coming in are coming in at a lower rate and lower pace than one would expect, creating this massive shortage of skills, massive shortage of capabilities, if you may, around this problem. And so when I start looking at this poll, as I'm going to try to maybe stop it in a second here, it is clear that many of you have a pretty good idea of what's happening. I'm seeing about 75% of you have said that the average age of the workers more than 44.4 years and past 50 years, which is actually pretty much dead on. So when you take a look at this picture, the average age by US Census data is 44.4 years and actually increasing. So when I take a look at the data that US Census produces in terms of the different industries and different SIC codes and by demographics, that number is actually going up every year probably 5% every year, which is pretty remarkable, right? So you have this problem of aging. And then the question becomes, what percentage of your workforce are 55 and older, right? And that's the second question, poll question I have for you guys. I'd love to understand where you are. And there again, many of you have responded to this already. So there again, 3/4 of you have said that more than 75% of you have said that it's 55 and older is a pretty big number, which is actually correct, because when I look at the data right now, 25% of these, 75% is at 20 to 25%. So that's exactly where the number is. And by the way, that number has been increasing too every year, right? So you have this issue where your workforce is aging, the percentage of older workers is growing. There's very few, less tenured or younger workers coming in, creating a pretty massive problem in the workforce. And so the question becomes, just as my customer was telling me the other day, when his colleague retires, who are you going to call? Are you going to go to the SharePoint folder to look for information? Are you going to go call somebody else who's been trained and not trained properly? It really is a huge issue. And, I read a study recently by Deloitte that they published, this Deloitte Insight study, is the fact that you have a situation where it is going to be $1 trillion problem for manufacturers in the next few years. It's not a small problem. It's a huge problem. It's a large number of positions that won't get filled across the board, across everywhere. And this is, by the way, these are primarily US data. A large number of positions won't get filled. And more importantly, there's a number of consequences that are going to come and bite these manufacturers, if you may, right? It's everything from poor customer service. It's not being able to manage the production levels that they need to manage. It's not being able to kind of deliver the values, respond to deals, kind of get things done. It's a big problem. $1 trillion is a big deal. And for those of you like my friends, Sam and Ron Giantini, who keep track of this, manufacturing, B2B manufacturing worldwide is about a $4 or $5 trillion market. And if $1 trillion of that, 20% is compromised, it's a huge deal, right? So I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is a pretty big problem that somebody needs to face. Now, what I've been saying to people, these are two phrases that come to mind every time I think of what I just shared with you and what I'm going to share next, right? As Hemingway famously said, how do people go bankrupt gradually then suddenly? And I think that's kind of what we've seen. It's not like this is a new phenomenon. It's not like this is new data. We've all seen this for a while now, by the way, the silver tsunami, retirements, and so on and so forth. So this is like a thing that we've all watched for a while, but is now suddenly becoming a big issue, a big event where people are beginning to panic. And the second thing is the famous statement that Lenin said, which is, things just seem like nothing happens for a while, then all of a sudden everything happens at one time. And so I use those statements to describe what we're seeing in terms of the aging workforce and what I think we're seeing since November 2022 in the context of generative AI. Now, what's interesting is that AI has been around for a while. In fact, we at Entytle have been practicing different forms of AI, different techniques, if you may, in our product and solution, probably since our founding. But this notion of generative AI is almost like a wave that's crashing on the shores of, worldwide business, worldwide, actually consumers and everything, right? It's a huge thing. And has brought awareness, has brought ideas, and has brought excitement to the world today in terms of how we can use it in terms of making our business and making our lives better. So the combination of aging workforce meeting this almost unstoppable force of generative AI is actually going to start making people think and create some things uniquely. And actually, that's what we're seeing now, right? So I started looking for information and saying, okay, who's thinking about autonomous, right? So the first thing we need to do, autonomous operations, the first thing that shows up is vehicles, right? So you kind of start your searches and ignore all these things. And you start focusing on manufacturing and autonomous, and it's very clear that things are beginning to happen, right? So there's people like some of the software vendors are talking about autonomous enterprise, play to manufacturer like Honeywell, talking about autonomous operations because they're really helping run factories out there. They talk about skill shortages out there. And even analysts like Gartner who are talking about machine customers, which is really robotic / automated / autonomous interactions going on. In fact, it's funny, I was talking to, again, one of my customers not too long ago, and I was explaining to him how we are thinking about this notion of autonomous aftermarket. And he said to me, Vivek, are you telling me that one day we'll be able to just have things run in the background and trigger things automatically? And then what will happen on the other side? What will happen on the customer side? Will they also have automatic receivers, automatic recipients of this information? So are you telling me one day machines will talk to machines? And I jokingly said yes. And weirdly enough, this is a report that had been put out that one of my friends out here on this call shared with me. So this machine-to-machine thing is also a big deal. It isn't necessarily IoT. It's this whole notion of being able to start having computers talk to one another and get things done. So Vivek, what does this mean? What does it mean in terms of autonomous aftermarket? How does it relate to me? Because by the way, all of you on the call today are people who we typically talk to, which is equipment manufacturers who are trying to fundamentally build out their aftermarket businesses in a more systematic and scalable manner. So what does it mean for you? So I did what every red-blooded person does these days, which is go to ChatGPT. Now, this is a bit too much to read. Don't worry, you'll get this deck so you can read it. But there's a whole host of things that they put out there, which talks about predictive stuff. They talked about remote monitoring and diagnostics. They talk about self-service portals. They talk about continuous upgrades and so on and so forth. By the way, every one of these elements have been in place for a while now. So this is not new. This has been in place now. But the opportunity here, the things that are happening out here, is the ability for us to pull all this stuff together in one shot at one place to make life different, easier, better, if you may, for the manufacturing worker going forward. So the way we think about it in Title and the way we translate some of the stuff that you see in the press and what you see around us is really simple. The future of the aftermarket is going to be automatic, where things just happen. It's going to be intelligent because these bots, these intelligent AI systems are going to think for you, if you may, for lots of things, all the way from generative AI to predictive algorithms and so on and so forth. And more importantly, once the models are proved, once the test cases are working correctly, they will work independently of you and each other, right? This is a fascinating thing. Like, some of us grew up watching the Jetsons back a long time ago. The future is not that far away in that context, right? So automatic, intelligent, independent are really the key words of the way we think about this transformation that's going to be taking place in the next few years. And so just to repeat myself, to kind of catch yourself at the midway point, autonomous aftermarket, automatic, intelligent, independent, responding to two big waves. One is a retirement/silver tsunami with a shortage of workers, the generative AI and broad-scale AI adoption that's suddenly started to accelerate everywhere is going to really open up some opportunities for us. So how do we think about the continuum of aftermarket? Because autonomous aftermarket, clearly it isn't like there's a big bang and then suddenly this thing happens out there, right? There's a continuum along which we expect these changes to happen. These changes to take place over time. So as in every case, there's a four-part framework. At least we got a four-part framework. At the outset, all of us are what we call stage one, right? Not all, but many of us, which is just human-led decisions and actions. We're all doing things. Just to give you an example, right? In our core business, in our predictive analytics business and the systems intelligence platform that we provide, we will create an opportunity for a customer, and then somebody has to do something with it. It's a human-led decision, a human-led action, which is, should I call John Doe at Acme Inc. to propose a new offering to him? And if so, what should I do, right? It's a decision and an action that a human does. No software, it's really tied to a human action. The second stage is, you know what? We can just automatically take these rote tasks, as we call it, and take them out of somebody's hands. So why do I need to call John Smith at Beta Inc. about this particular offer? Why can't I just send an email out there? What's the workflows that I need to put in place to get there? So those are the kind of things we're starting to see in many of our customers and many of manufacturers. Things are just happening behind the scenes, digital transformations happening. But the underpinning of all that is the data that needs to get unified, right? You need to assemble huge amounts of data to kind of make this thing work. And that's really important out here as well. The third stage is, can these algorithms learn from the results? Can we figure out how to make this data science, or the DS sense, or data science, by the way, can we make these models understand the behavior better, right? In other words, we make a prediction, we make a prescription, as we call it, which is tell somebody to go do something. Can we go back and tie back and see what happened after that? Can we reinforce the things that work well? Can we de-emphasize things that did not work well? How do we make sure that neural network kind of learns from all the actions, all the activities going on, and kind of improves itself and gets better, right? So that's the third stage, which are beginning to start seeing things, right? For example, again, this is not meant to be an entitled advertisement, but a lot of the stuff we built are supervised learning models that are kind of learning from the reactions, learning from what happened in the past and what's happened with the reaction, with the predictions and how they got disposed of, and making sure this thing works well. So that's the stage three. And the last stage is nirvana, as I call it, which is self-optimized, which is all the artificial intelligence. The feedback loops are automated. You continuously measure and optimize activities and keep fine-tuning these models again and again, right? So there's a range. By the way, this is our model. It doesn't mean that's the only model, but this is our model and how we think about it stuff, right? So that's kind of where we see this business going to in terms of the autonomous aftermarket development and how it is going to go. When I was a young lad, I was in charge of a big initiative of one of the companies I worked at, and we were talking, and I was walking down the street with my then boss, and he said, Vivek, no matter what you do, no moonshots. And I couldn't quite understand what that meant, right? But in his mind, it is very clear. There's a lot of ways to achieve change, but not all of it needs to happen straight at one shot where you're launching a Saturn V to the moon, right? There's lots of experiments that can happen along the way. There are lots of things you can do along the way to mitigate risk and get results, learn from these experiments, and get better and better. So again, remember, no moonshots is a mantra behind this thing. So the question is, okay, Vivek, no moonshots, and then what? So Clay Christensen popularized this theory called jobs to be done, which is really a fancy way to say, look, you got to break down whatever you do and the things that people have to do as part of the daily jobs. And based on jobs to get done, you kind of go build stuff, build solutions, build technology, build whatever it might be. And using that framework of jobs you've done is really a good way to mitigate a risk and show quick wins. Because you don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to build this crazy Saturn V on day one and launch it instead of waiting until 1969 with a bunch of experiments. You can kind of do this all, in a systematic and scalable manner. So, no moonshots, build a jobs to be done framework and get going. So what I'm about to show you in the next few pages is just a couple of suggestions on the kinds of things you can do to kind of get started. This by no means is a complete comprehensive coverage of all the jobs, but just some things that we are seeing today that our customers are already starting to put in place, right? So with that, what I want to show you is a couple of examples for on the before and after, right? By the way, if you go into manufacturing America, manufacturing Europe today, quotes and order processing is extraordinarily manual. I'm still surprised when I hear the statistic that almost 60 to 70% of order inquiries that come in today to most manufacturers are either by phone or email, right? So somebody has to take a phone call or an email, process it, go look up some information, figure it out, negotiate the price, go things, get this approval process going, and then send it out there. And oh, by the way, half these things are made to order, so you're going to go schedule a part. But there's no need for that, right? If you can find a way to take even a phone call, just take all this information by phone. There's transcripts that are automated these days. You can take this information, put it in the right place, identify these opportunities, and kind of make all this thing work. It's really not that hard to see a future where you can really intelligently, automatically, and independently make this quotation process work. In fact, we're working with a couple of other customers right now to take this email process and make it automated, and eventually we'll get to the phone process. But these are the kinds of things that are in the realm of autonomous aftermarket. There's no need for human intervention from the time the email comes until the time it goes out. Of course, there's a lot of things that happen between now and then in terms of validation and tests and so on and so forth, but the fundamental underpinnings of technology are available to make all this thing happen. Oh, and by the way, you just dramatically reduce 60% of the work, which means there are two things. One is a retiring Jane Smith. Either you don't replace her, or more importantly, when Jane Smith retires, the person who comes in takes and creates a different set of value in the quote to order process, right? So there's a couple of different ways to think about it. The second idea is a service request handling, the same thing. We're seeing this time and time again. Something breaks in the field, the service person in the field has to call somebody back home. What do I do about it? The documentation is messed up. We actually talked to one of our customers who has, quote unquote, a knowledge center, which is just really a fancy way to say they have a big call center of highly trained, very expensive tenured experts who are taking calls from the field. John, this particular spindle is leaking oil. What do I do about it? Right? I can't diagnose this thing. That's not giving the right codes. So it's a lot of information that's going back and forth. Believe it or not, they literally have phone calls going to these experts. We almost got involved with one of our customers who wanted to create a network of these people around the world who can answer questions, right? That was an interesting idea, which thankfully never went forward. Now, once this incident's in the automated system, you can automatically go and search product brochures, repair manuals, service notes, past histories, and so on and so forth to really be able to narrow down very quickly what the issues are, What happened in that automatically make a recommendation and even dispatch if you have to a part, right? And this is again not nirvana, not dreaming. These are beginning to happen now in some of our customers. So again, in the first example is quotation and sales. This is service requests, account planning, right? I cannot tell you how many times we see situations where our customers or prospects are looking at spreadsheet Armageddon, if you may, downloading information from one system, matching into something else, making sense of it. 5 people staring at a spreadsheet, looking at things, trying to make sense of it. Again, no need for that. This data is available. Match it automatically, analyze it automatically, look at the trends, kind of create a little report, write a little narrative because those are easily available to write in templates, put it together and present that. By the way, just FYI, many of you guys probably know this and probably use it, but the conversational AI tools that exist today are already doing that. They're taking transcripts of these phone calls we have, summarizing them, but more importantly, synthesizing them for lessons. And that's the same technology that can be applied to account plans or sales plans. Again, these are the things that are existing today. The building blocks are in place, and there's no reason for us not to do that. The fourth example is in reducing what we call churn, which is when customers leave you, understanding what's happening. So we have a technology in our platform we call Loyalty Manager, which is really a fancy way to say we look at a whole bunch of data and attributes and kind of put together a little score that says so-and-so customer is either really loyal or, it needs attention, right? Which is say, we're not seeing enough good work happening out here, or we're not seeing the right signals out here. Today, every one of our customers looks at this information, quote unquote, manually, which is to say they have a review, they look at the best customers, they look at the needs attention, they look at the in-between customers, and they build individual plans. Tomorrow, we are trying to automate this whole process because once the scores are there, once you validate these scores as yes, indeed, this customer is the one that's kind of a little shaky, we need to kind of do something about it. There's no reason to have human intervention to kind of highlight the list, create an action plan, and provide it to that sales or service person right away. You can independently make this thing happen as well, right? So those are the kinds of things you're beginning to start seeing in our customers. There's a lot of interest in this activity. And these are all the building blocks it takes to make an autonomous aftermarket a reality. So that's the process we're going through right now. We're building out some use cases. We talked about the relevant emails. We talked about this little knowledge base we talked about in terms of instead of a knowledge center, have an automatic querying tool attached to the install base information. These are real. These are things that are in place today and are beginning to get traction. And there's everything that every one of you can go out and set ourselves to do with the right information in place. So the question then becomes, okay, Vivek, what do you do about this? This is another phrase that one of my managers said to me a long time ago. It's like, Vivek, perfect is the enemy of good. You cannot wait for everything to line up correctly. You got to start somewhere. You got to start some experiments. You got to start doing these things in a way that you can start making progress and getting forward, right? So in our point of view, our how-to to take the manifest, the perfect is the enemy of good, is to really put together a simple framework in terms of how we make this real, right? We talked about the jobs we get done framework. I gave you 4 examples: sales, service, quotation, account planning, and so on and so forth. You guys have a big menu of use cases that exist within a company today. Figure out where your big pain points are. Figure out where your, what I would call the best use cases are, where you can mitigate a risk if something goes wrong, you quickly unwind everything and not lose a beat. B, but if you win, it gets somebody's attention, right? So find the right use case. Clearly set yourself some goals to hit, right? Because an experiment for the sake of experiment doesn't really do anything, right? Is it a numerical goal? Is it a quality goal in terms of sentiment? Is it a productivity goal in terms of people and so on and so forth, right? In terms of takt time saved and so on. So be clearly articulating that goal. The third thing, which is important in this case, is remember, in as much as artificial intelligence has progressed in the last few years and Gen AI is making rapid advances, there still is a lot of thing that needs to get fixed, right? You've heard the word hallucinations, not the way we think about it in terms of alternative substances, but it's really in the terms of how these programs are creating some insights, are creating some statements that aren't true. So you need to get some subject matter experts aligned with you to make sure that we can test, validate, train models correctly. So get that in place. That's really important. And then the last part is develop iteratively, right? So you're not going to get it right the first shot. get the experiment going, figure out the lessons, fix it, learn, get to the next iteration, and so on and so forth, till you're ready to do it. But at the heart of it all, to go back to the chart on the continuum of autonomous aftermarket progression, is you have to make sure you pay attention to the data. You have to organize it well. You have to assemble it correctly. You got to make sure it's treated and prepared correctly, because without it, none of the stuff's going to work right. Everybody thinks I can just go to Gen AI, Chat GPT, or whatever your favorite tool is, and just type in something and come out. You're not going to be able to apply that technology within your four walls. There's a lot of work to get done. And it really starts with data and data integrity and data completeness and data unification. So we really have to pay attention to that. It's not an insignificant task, and it's probably the most important foundational thinking you should do. In fact, I should have labeled that phase 0, organize and assemble data. But it starts with a use case. So that's kind of where we are. My view is that, as always, this is a moving target. As always, there's a lot of work to get done. You're not going to get to the answer tomorrow. It's taken us a long time to even get to what we're seeing in the world today in 2024. And, the best time always is to just get going right now. Right? No matter what you do, you're 2 to 5 to 10 years away from really putting things in place. The $1 trillion problem in 2030 is coming up in 6 years from now. If you don't start now, 2030 is going to be a really big problem for all of you. And I recommend that you really start getting now, right? As always say, you could have planted this seed 20 years ago, but if not, please plant it right now and let's get on with it. So with that, that's the end of my prepared presentation, if you may. This is really a topic that's near and dear to my heart. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the world around us right now. I want to make sure that we kind of keep track of it and kind of really help answer and advance the opportunity in front of us. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, JW.
Awesome. All right, folks, thank you so much for your time today. Vivek, thank you again for the presentation and sharing the knowledge.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
I appreciate you all dialing from all over the world, and have a good evening, good day, and